the Grouchy Nerd.
Alright, quiet down, knuckleheads. It's time to take another look at a new hero for Fantasy Flight Games Marvel Champions. This time we're looking at Magik. Ilyana Rasputin was born on a Russian collective farm, youngest sibling to Mikhail Rasputin, a mutant cosmonaut, and Peter Rasputin, better known to the world as Colossus. When Peter was recruited to the X-Men, he and Ilyana both fled to America, their older brother Mikhail having been conscripted into government service. At the age of 6, Ilyana was abducted by Belasco, a one-time prisoner and now ruler of Limbo, a pocket universe filled with demons and magic, including alternate magic-y versions of some of the X-Men. She spent years in Limbo, suffering constant beatings from Belasco's servant Sim, and Belasco shaving parts of her soul to make bloodstones, powerful magical instruments used to bring forth elder gods. And having absolutely nothing to do with my beloved Elsa Bloodstone, that is just a unfortunate naming coincidence. Ilyana was eventually rescued by an alternate Storm and Shadowcat, who then trained her in magic and fighting until Belasco forced her to kill them both. Though her mutant ability also began to develop, the ability to create interdimensional portals, which is just really lucky, I guess. You get stuck in an alternate dimension and you develop the ability to move between that dimension and your own? What are the odds of that? She found a way back to her parents' farm, but then decided Limbo was better than rural Russia. Upon her return, she used her own life force to create the Soul Sword and used it to defeat Belasco. She returned to Earth in the same moment that she was kidnapped, however she had aged several years, and with the loss of so much of her soul, she found that using her magic on this side of Limbo made her go a bit, evil. And she also discovered that using her soul sword on this side came with an eldritch armor which forms around her body. Since then, she's trained and fought with the New Mutants, been trained by Charles Xavier, Magneto, and Doctor Strange, learning to control her portal abilities enough to transport herself and teammates over great distances or even interdimensionally. She took over Limbo, lost control of Limbo, gave in to her darkest thoughts, and became Darkchild, a demonic form of herself with no soul. Died, becoming the first victim of the legacy virus. Belasco brought her back using a soul stone, but she returned as Darkchild, though she eventually found a balance between Darkchild and Ilyana, albeit still with no soul. Oh, and she also briefly played host to the Phoenix Force, which seems like kind of a big deal. And she's just all around kind of a grumpy jerk, and she's perfect and I love her. Let's take a look. On her hero side is Magik, who does 1 thwart, 2 attack, and 2 defense. She gets a hand size of 5, 10 hit points, the Mystic and X-Men traits, and she gets to play with the top card of her deck face up. Once per phase, you may play the top card of your deck as if it was in your hand, reducing its cost by 1. So once per phase, you get to play a card at a discount that doesn't even come out of your hand. That's like getting 2 free resources every phase. That's twice around if you can find a card that you can play in the villain phase. That's incredible! On her alter ego side is Ilyana Rasputin, who has a recovery of 3. Her hand size goes up to 6, and her X-Men trait becomes mutant. And as an interrupt, when you change to hero form, choose a spell in your discard pile and put it on top of your deck. Yeah, that's awesome. It can sometimes be tricky dipping down to alter ego form when you're playing true solo, knowing that you're probably going to get hit with a massive amount of threat on the main scheme. But when you do, as Ilyana, when you flip back to hero, you're going to be able to tee up the exact right spell card you want to use at a discount. That's cool. Her signature ally is Colossus in the style of Big Bro Peter Rasputin. He's a 3-cost ally who does 2 thwart and 2 attack, has 3 hit points, the X-Men trait, and the toughness keyword. And as an interrupt when an enemy attacks you, you can play Colossus from your hand, paying his resource cost, and declare him the defender without exhausting him. So then all it does is clear the tough that comes with the toughness keyword. And if you play this as that response, as you're being attacked, you play him off the top of your deck, you're going to then get him at a discount, 2 cost to get a 3 hit point ally into play that does 2s in both of his stats. And you're still going to then get to do another card at a discount in the next hero phase, because it's once per phase. So that's the villain phase 1, and now you got a whole another time to use a discounted card. Limbo is next. We get one copy of this one-cost support card with the Dimension trait. As a response, after the villain phase begins, exhaust Limbo to swap a card in your hand with the top card of your deck. And as an action during your turn, you can do the same thing. It is so nice to be able to put down the exact right card from your hand onto the top of your deck before you move into the villain phase that you can then play at a discount like Colossus or like, I'm getting ahead of myself here, but all of the protection aspect. Next up is one copy of Magik's Crown, a 2-cost item upgrade, which gives Magik steady, so it's going to take one more stun or confuse to stun or confuse her. And while the top card of your deck has a mental or wild resource, Magik gains +1 to her basic thwart. Stuns and confuses suck real bad, so making it more difficult for one of them to stick to you is awesome, and with that extra bit about boosting the thwart, I think you can see where we're headed with the next couple of cards, and it's awesome. Soul Sword is a 1-cost weapon upgrade with the restricted keyword, and it gives Magik's basic attack piercing. And while the top card of your deck has a physical or wild resource, those basic attacks gain +1. That's up to 3 with piercing. Rounding out the stat boost is Mystical Armor, a 1-cost armor upgrade which gives Magik Retaliate 1. While the top card of your deck is an energy or wild icon, Magik gains +1 to her defense. So once you've got Limbo and these 3 upgrades in play, you can basically boost whichever stat you want to boost anytime you want to boost it. And all the better if you then want to play the card you set out to get the boost at a discount. Then we get just one copy of Scrying, a 0-cost spell event. As an action, look at the top 3 cards of your deck. Draw 1, discard 1, and put 1 back on top of your deck. Yet another way to load up the exact card that you want to play at a discount, or whichever symbol you want to use to boost whichever stat you want to use, and it replaces itself in your hand. Next up is 3 copies of a 1-cost event with the superpower trait, Stepping Disc. As a hero action, ready Magik. Then put a Magik card from your discard pile that isn't another copy of Stepping Disc and put it on top of your deck. A ready and a chance to swap out which card is on top of your deck, so you could use your basic thwart with a mental resource on top, so you boost that. Use this to ready and then make sure that the top card is a physical resource, and then you do your basic attack. 2 copies of Exorcism is next. It's a 2-cost thwart spell event. As a hero action, remove 4 threat from a scheme. If the top card of your deck is a mental or wild icon, confuse the villain. Well, we already know that she's going to want to dip down to alter ego fairly often so that she can pull the exact right spell card back on top of her deck to then play it at a discount. So, any chance to confuse the villain to make it that much safer to go down to alter ego is certainly no bad thing. Next up is 2 copies of Soul Strike, a 2-cost spell attack event. As a hero action, deal 4 damage to an enemy. If the top card of your deck is a physical or wild resource, stun that enemy. 2 for 4 plus a thing is, generally speaking, under the curve of what most heroes get. It's usually 2 for maybe 8, 2 or 3 for 8, or 2 for 6 plus it does a thing. This is 2 for 4 and it might do a thing. Or you could play it off the top of your deck and it's 1 for 4 and it might do a thing. Or you can use Limbo to put this directly on top of a physical resource card that you know is on the top of your deck. Then you're paying 1 for 4 and a stun. And that 1 for 4 plus a stun, that's amazing. Rounding out her kit is Magic Barrier. We get 2 copies of this 1-cost defense spell event. As a hero interrupt, when an enemy initiates an attack, prevent 3 damage from this attack. If the top card of your deck is an energy resource, deal 3 damage to the attacking enemy. Canceling 3 damage is of course great, and again, if you're able to put this on top of an energy resource card and then play it at a discount during the villain phase and you know that there is an energy resource underneath it, that's so good. The bad stuff. Ilyana's obligation is Dark Child. You may flip to alter ego form, then you can exhaust as Ilyana to remove this from the game, or deal 1 damage to each character you control to just discard it. And her defense is actually pretty solid, and it can get better if you know that you have an energy resource on top of your deck, so you may actually be defending reasonably often, so you may actually get hit with this when it comes up. Luckily, it is just 1 damage to everybody, but still, that could very much impact what your plans were for allies this next turn. Her signature nemesis minion is Belasco, who has 6 health, the elite and limbo traits, and does only 1s in his stats, which is never a good sign because he also has the villainous keyword, so he gets a boost card every time he activates. And as a forced response, after Belasco activates against you, discard the top 3 cards of your deck. If Ruler of Limbo, his side scheme, is in play, attach those cards to it face down. We'll see just how bad that is in a second, but 6 health and he's got Villainous? That is trouble. That means you're probably not going to be safe to flip down to Alter Ego while this guy is in play if you're dealing with both the villain and Belasco getting a boost card when they do their scheme. That's probably ending the game. You don't want to do that. Ruler of Limbo comes into play with 3 threat on it and sports the Amplify icon, so every boost card gets +1. Threat cannot be removed from this side scheme while Belasco is in play, and when it's revealed, Ilyana finds Limbo and attaches it face down here. When this scheme is defeated, put Limbo into play. And it can be pretty disruptive if you've gotten used to using Limbo to set the top card of your deck, especially in the villain phase, if you know you're putting down defensive cards a lot. This can really mess you up. Of course, if you haven't found Limbo yet, this does find it and put it into play, but that's a small silver lining. Plus, we're not done looking at ways where it may stick around for kind of a while. Because next comes Sim, who does 2 scheme and 2 attack. He has 5 health, the limbo trait, and the guard keyword. And when he's revealed, if Ruler of Limbo is in play, place 2 threat on it. If not, place 2 threat on the main scheme instead. 5 health and guard is a nasty combination, and those 2 extra threat are also pretty terrible. That's pretty bad. Then Witchfire is next, who does 1 scheme, 3 attack, and has 4 health, the limbo trait, and the quick strike keyword, so she's doing that 3 attack right away. And as a forced response, after she attacks and defeats an ally, place 1 threat on Ruler of Limbo or the main scheme if Ruler of Limbo is not in play. I hate quick strike. And between the 3 of them, her minions have 15 health? Last is Battle for Limbo, a treachery. When it's revealed, each Limbo minion in play activates against the player it's engaged with. If no minion attacks this way, it gains Surge, and if it's drawn as a boost card, it gives Ruler of Limbo 2 threat if it's in play. It's not like you need an incentive to take these minions out quickly when they pop up, but this is a pretty good incentive to take those minions out quickly when they pop up, so they don't get another activation out on you. Moving on to her aspect cards, Magik came with an aggression deck. Up first is... I don't think you need to censor that. Gold Balls, as played by Fabio Medina. He's a 3-cost X-Men ally with 3 hit points who does 1 thwart and 1 attack. But when he does that attack, discard up to 3 cards from the top of your deck. Gold Balls gets +1 to his attack for each card you discarded this way. Getting maybe 12 damage from this guy is pretty great, although you are discarding cards from the top of your deck that you might want to see, so he may fit best with heroes that have alter ego abilities that pull cards from their discard pile back into their deck or their hand. Then we get Tempest in the style of Eva Bell. She's a 2-cost X-Men ally, which you can only play if your identity has the X-Men trait. She has 2 hit points and does 1 thwart and 1 attack, and she has an interrupt. When the villain would scheme, discard Tempest to cancel that activation, but it also costs you an additional encounter card. Kind of a bit sort of like the Nightcrawler ally who can block an attack coming your way. This blocks a scheme coming your way, although she doesn't go back into your hand, she just gets discarded, but that's still pretty awesome. Next up is 3 copies of Blood Rage, a 1-cost upgrade, max 1 per identity. As a response, after you defeat an enemy with a basic attack, exhaust Blood Rage and take 1 damage to draw 1 card. Awesome for heroes with a large hit point pool and a pretty solid basic attack. SPDR, Spider, I never figured out how to say her name, or Thor. Those 2 come to mind, and of course Wolverine and X-23, who are already treating their hit points as an additional resource, knowing that they're going to heal right back up. Great for them too. Then we get 3 copies of Test the Defense, another 1-cost upgrade and another with a max of 1 per identity. As a response, after you play an attack event, place 1 test counter here. If there are 5 test counters here, discard this card to deal 5 damage to an enemy. Ms. Marvel can bring an event back to hand so she can potentially play it multiple times, filling one of these up. Wolverine can pay for cards with resources and pay for one using his health, so he could fill one of these up pretty quickly. Spider-Woman wants to play a bunch of cheap cards from all the various aspects to boost all of her stats. Hawkeye, all of his arrows are events. I should stop. Full Body Charge is next. It's a 4-cost attack event. As a hero action, deal 8 damage to an enemy. If your hero's remaining hit points are less than half of your hero's starting hit points, it gains overkill. Looking again at Wolverine and X-23, who are already playing their hit points as resources and really riding that line between safe and maybe not so safe as far as hit points goes, so they have a much better opportunity to be triggering that overkill, although that 4 cost is pretty prohibitive. I mean, that's the entire hand of most heroes. That part kind of sucks if you don't have any kind of resource generators or anything like that. That can be tough to pull off. Our first neutral card is Triage, aka Christopher Muse. He's a 2-cost ally with 2 hit points who does 1 thwart and 1 attack. He has the X-Men trait, and as a response, after he enters play, heal 2 damage from an X-Men character. Another great card for the Beclawed, and in Magik's case, being able to play him off the top of your deck is 2 heals plus a block for 1 resource. Next is 1 copy of the Stepford Cuckoos, a 3-cost support with the Persona and Psionic traits, which may only be played if your identity has the X-Men trait, and comes into play with 3 Psi counters. As an interrupt, when a player reveals a treachery, exhaust Stepford Cuckoos and remove 1 Psi counter to cancel the effects of that treachery and discard it. Then that identity gets a new encounter card. Limited to X-Men is so mean. I want to take this all the time, every time. Then 1 copy of Blood Gem, a 0-cost upgrade with the item trait, which may only be played by identities with the Mystic trait, max 1 per deck. You can exhaust Blood Gem and take 2 damage to generate a wild resource. 2 health for a wild? Do we like that? Is that good? That doesn't seem good. And last is 3 copies of Basic Spell, a 2-cost spell event which may only be played by an identity with the Mystic trait. As a hero action, choose 1. Heal 3 damage from an identity, remove 3 threat from a scheme, or deal 3 damage to an enemy. All great things to do, and Magik can pull this from her discard pile when she flips from Ilyana to Magik and put it on top of her deck and then play it at a discount. So you might be doing 1 resource for 3 heal or 1 resource for 3 thwart. That's very good. As for the rest of the Mystics, I'm not sure if Doctor Strange or Wanda necessarily need it, although Adam Warlock does have a few basic slots he can fill, and this is pretty decent for him. Fans of Arkham Horror, the card game, who have played as Norman Withers may recognize this mechanic of playing the top card of your deck face up at a discount and may know how wildly valuable that can be. You're basically getting a 2-resource discount every time you play a card from there because you're getting the discount that you get just from playing that card, but it's also not coming out of your hand, so you still have all of those cards to be able to do anything you want with. And with Sorcerer Supreme, I don't need to spend time on that, right? We all just agree that Magik should take Sorcerer Supreme. She should just do it. She's going to be able to do a whole lot on her turn. She's getting the 2 free resources off of that and an extra card in her hand every hero phase. That's awesome. The fact that she gets to do that in both phases also means that protection is going to be an excellent fit with her. You get to put down, once you have Limbo in play, you get to put down a card on top of your deck that you want to play at a discount during the villain phase. That can be Sidestep or something like that. When the villain attacks you, you're then playing that at a discount and not taking any damage. But you could also load your entire deck up with a bunch of X-Men allies and take Mutant Defenders, and then you use Mutant Defenders off the top of your deck to put one of those allies in play. It takes a big hit for you. It's dark. It's pretty dark that she's calling in these allies just to take massive hits for her, but it's also totally on brand for Magik. Magic Attack, Shield Spell, Summoning Spell, and Zone of Silence, which are the only aspect spell cards we have seen so far, Each involve discarding cards off the top of your deck until something happens, whatever the thing is that they do. That means that White Fox, who is an ally that goes into play when you discard her off the top of your deck, is also an excellent fit. She just goes into play for free when you've discarded her. Digging Deep does the same thing, except it's resource cards and they go directly into your hand. So if you're taking those spell cards, you should also be taking Digging Deep. I mean, should. Do whatever you want. I'm just saying these are cards that I think work well. White Fox, Digging Deep. She's also likely going to be flipping back and forth from Alter Ego so that she can set up a spell card on top of her deck to do exactly the thing that she wants to do next turn. So Moira McTaggart is a great take. I mean, Moira McTaggart is a great take for basically all mutants, but also Magik. Now, there's a whole lot you can do when you know what the next card of your deck is going to be, but I'm just going to hit a few of the highlights. You know who's weirdly Magik's best friend in aggression? Hulk. You know what the top card is going to be before you decide whether or not to activate Hulk. If it's going to be a mental resource or a wild resource, you just don't activate them. Make sure you got a physical resource down so you're doing as much damage as possible. Over in Leadership, you can use Limbo to set an X-Men ally on top of your deck and then use To Me My X-Men to search the top 5 cards of your deck for an ally, which you know you're going to hit because you just put one directly on top. That guy gets to go out into play for free. And of course, the best boy in the whole galaxy, Cosmo. You discard a card from the top of any deck and name whatever type it's going to be. Well, you don't have to guess. You can read it. You can read event, you can read ally, and then Cosmo never takes any consequential damage ever. Ever. How could you mess it up? You just gotta read. And that's all I've got for Magik. Now get off my lawn.
The Grouchy Nerd